Hi everybody, I'm here with Jenny Seek. She is a hypnotherapist. She does some sacred bracelet designs. We're just going to pick her brain a little bit about the hypnotherapy and anything related to that, honestly. So what got you started in hypnotherapy,
What
or
got
what
me?
got you interested?
Sure, yeah. Well, I started Inner Voice Intuitive, which is my business, about 20 years ago. And I got intrigued with hypnotherapy when I was on a shamanic journey weekend up in Michigan. There's a wonderful, wonderful place up there called the Crow's Nest. And I went to learn a technique, well, to practice and try a technique myself first, of sacred breath work, which is a slowing down of the breath, and it creates an alternate state where you can kind of see things. It's kind of honestly a little like a drug trip, but it's just by slowing down the breath and going into this inner space. And when I did that work, a blue-black shaman came to me, and he had like that blue-black, really dark African skin. And he had come to me in dream time before, and he came and he kissed me on the cheek. And then the shamanic experience shifted, and he was standing at the entrance to my doorway, and he had opened the door, and he was letting all of these different spirits and energies into the room. And I knew that my business was going to shift and change, and I was going to offer something else, but I wasn't sure what it was. And I got back to Ohio, to my home, and there was a gentleman there who was offering on the internet, who was offering a series of hypnotherapy classes and a certification. And I just thought, well, this is the right thing, and I just dived right in and did it. And then I just put it up on the website and started offering it. So that's how it all began.
Awesome. So when it comes to like hypnotherapy, I guess teaching, how long does that so you said it was like what, how many weeks?
Oh, the class was like, I think it was like 12 weeks, and we had to find clients, if you will, who we worked with on a regular basis, just to practice all of it and then learn the techniques and all of that. So
Okay, awesome.
yeah.
And then, so like, what do you typically help people with when it comes to hypnotherapy?
Different kinds of things. So hypnotherapy has a tendency to be a lot of a kind of fix-it mentality. So, losing weight, stopping smoking. I've done some of that. But what I'm more intrigued with hypnotherapy is the idea of the unconscious, and specifically the collective unconscious. So this idea that there's this repository of depth in each of us, where all of our imaginative fodder, all of our imagination lies, all of our dreams lie. And that in this culture, there's a very strict split between the unconscious and the conscious. It isn't so in other cultures so much, but it is so in this culture. And because of that, we are always focused on our ego often to try to make the next thing happen. And we can get very, very amped up. We can hold a lot energetically inside, internally, and not be able to dip into that beautiful repository of the imagination, where our calling, those deeper connections with nature, those deeper connections with the dream time, and creative connections live. What I really like to do when working with clients is find out who they are and how that space is limiting them, how they're being limited from following their dreams. And then I like to help them by dipping into that space symbolically, because often we find that there are certain symbols that are evocative to them, that kind of pop out, that are very, very meaningful to them. I was just working with a client yesterday who had this image of driving away in her car and her hair blowing in the breeze. And for her, that felt like this liberating experience in the body. So we know that we're going into this place of the collective unconscious, this place of this repository of the imagination and the symbolic.
So the collective is basically like letting yourself open up to other ideas that you wouldn't probably necessarily do, maybe, you know, when it comes to the culture. Like let's say our culture is very like marriage based. You know, you get married and you have kids at a certain age, you know, and when you're not there, you're kind of like open to other possibilities.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And so we find that when people live their lives on their own terms, not based on what society tells them they should do, or tropes or roles that they play, their lives are more authentic and more embodied. And so, yes, very much so. We're getting a lot of messages from the culture about what we should do, you know, like you're talking about marriage, or about what we should do out in the world in terms of work, or any of these kinds of things. And we can take them in and let them bypass our own sense of morality, of uniqueness, of goodness, because they're so predominant in the culture. So the more that, yes, you can ask those kinds of meaningful questions about, like, do I want to get married, and what does that look like for me? What does an authentic marriage, an authentic connection look like? Would it be long term? Would it just be with one person? I mean, I don't know, all of these kinds of details, right? And that's how the culture starts to change when we're more authentic and honor ourselves.
And I think that's interesting because, sorry, my arm is hurting a little bit. I think it's interesting because I was talking to my boyfriend the other day, and we were talking about marriage, and he was like, I don't really want a wedding. Like, we were talking about our friends getting married. And I was like, I don't either. I was like, I want a marriage, you know? And I was like, and I think that that's changed over time. I think a lot of people have grown into this cultural thing where, you know, they have the wedding dress and the wedding and the people and the food, and they don't really want the marriage. Almost, like, exactly. So I think that it's just kind of interesting how everything has shifted a little bit, but also opening your mind up to...
Well, you're speaking of something that's really, really important, rituals with no meaning. And that's what happens over time, is people attach to rituals that don't hold meaning for them. So every culture, every generation has to honor what feels meaningful and important and sacred to them. And with my practice, I really try to hone in on all those sorts of things. What does your work life look like? What makes you happy? What makes you happy as a couple? Where does your energy live in your body? So many of us live out lives that are for our parents, or for our grandparents, or for our generational, you know, that generational thing, and don't really honor what is authentically true for them in the here and now. So I think that it's super important to ask those kinds of questions.
And you think that hypnotherapy works for that?
Absolutely.
Because I would say my personal experience is that my parents, like I was telling you before, paid for my college. You know, and they obviously want to set me up for success, and their success during that day was you go to college, you know, you get a degree and you start off with a $50,000 job or whatever in the corporate, and you get security like insurance and things like that. And now a lot of people that I talk to, it's freelance, you know, it's very, it's what we're doing right now. You know what I mean? Like, it's really a lot of people, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I know it's hard.
It's okay.
It's really like hard to kind of also, I guess, explain that to people as well.
And I think too that when you do hypnotherapy, you have these limiting beliefs, and we have a tendency to hold on to these kind of ideas of my family would never accept that, or my belief isn't that, you know. And I think what we're doing when we're working in the repository of the unconscious is we're breaking down those ideas. So maybe we don't go to our parents and say, I'm not doing that. Maybe we do the inner work so that we don't have this extra energy that when we come to them, we have an expectation of them. But we do the inner work, so then we don't even ask the question in a way where they can have so much of an impact or effect. Do you know what I mean?
I think a lot of it, exactly. And I, yes.
That's about that inner strength piece.
Definitely.
What we're going to say?
this is kind of off topic, but also I also do agree with the fact that a lot of the parents for my generation pay for things.
Yeah.
You know, and then so it's kind of like you're kind of stuck in a, you know, they pay for things. I kind of got to do what they say, but I also know that it's not working anymore.
Exactly.
You know? And I went through that specifically. I was a marketing director for a plastic surgery company. I did all the corporate stuff. And it just, I wasn't making enough money, and I wasn't, you know, I wasn't doing what I wanted to do either.
Yeah.
And
well, and we all have struggles with that. I mean, you know, when I told my parents I was going to go to Pacifica Graduate Institute and get my master's in counseling, my father was totally opposed to it. He said, you have to have a successful 6-figure business before you ever go to graduate school. And I was like, whoa, like that's your value system. And I said, you know, I'm going to do this. I've already made my choice. You can either support me or not support me, but you don't get to make that call for me, right? So when we do that inner work, we do things like hypnotherapy, we do things like dream work, we do things like chakra balancing, we get stronger inside. So we give messages that are clearer and more consistent with our values.
Values and who you are as a person.
Exactly.
You know, like I really learned a lot about myself. I was like, I am not going to work hard for anything that I don't believe in.
Good for you.
You know, and I was like, but I'm a hard worker. So I was like kind of like caught between like, am I a hard worker or am I lazy? Like, I don't really know. And it was like, I really needed to tap into the self-awareness part of that. And I think I naturally did that on my own, but at the same time I don't think that a lot of people have that capability to do that. And I think that hypnotherapy kind of sends you into a state of mind that is very suggestive, and you're very open to all ideas, you know, like, and I didn't even think about this either. I met Tim that I was telling you about, and he, I don't know, he opened a lot of doors for me. Like, he really was like, why do you need a car? And I was like, well, everybody else has a car, so, and he was like, yeah, but you don't need one. And, and I was like,
good for him.
Oh,
good for you.
I was like, I guess I could bike everywhere, and so I have, like, you know, and
great.
But I think that as much as he helped me that way, I think it is the same as the hypnotherapy. You know, like you kind of do need that where somebody's like, okay, you've been living this way your entire life, but there are other options, and I can show you that, or, you know, the mindset can show you that.
Well, you're leaning into a space, what you're talking about is leaning into a space of increased awareness in the self. And what hypnotherapy really does is it allows someone to lean into that space. So, you know, you might have a session with me and then something else kind of comes up in your mind in a different way, because you've had that doorway kind of open and you're open to it. Like, for instance, you talked about a little while ago, this idea that you're a very, very hard worker, but you won't work for anything that you don't believe in.
I won't.
That's so fantastic. You know that. So that's like a core belief. And in working with you, I would ask you what that means to you. What have you done that you didn't believe in? And what have you done that you felt like you could believe more in? Because those would be anchors within the hypnotherapy. And was there a symbol that embodied that experience? Was there a feeling? Where was it held in your body? So then we go from this idea level, which is outside and can be focused on what people tell us, to this intrinsic core level where we say, no, this is what's true for me. This is what authentic and is realized for me. And I help you lean in and open that door much, much wider so you can explore while you're with me, and then in between sessions, what comes up for you about those beliefs.
I was just, it's a funny story. I was like driving and I was just thinking, so I work at a restaurant and I serve, and they had a 10-inch like pizza or whatever on the kids menu, and you get 2 sides. and they took that off. Like, so you have to buy the 14-inch. This is a random story, but I was like, so I asked my manager, I said, well, if you buy the 14-inch, they still get the 2 free sides then, don't they? And he was like, no. And I was like, but they should. And he was like, but those aren't the rules. And I was like, but I don't agree with those rules.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, like, so I think I'm more learning that as much as there are rules set in place and you have a certain mindset your entire life and you're told certain things, it doesn't mean that those are set in stone, you know?
Absolutely.
And I think, like, even my mind is, like, minuscule as that is, I just was like, I don't agree with that, you know?
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Yeah,
and
for sure.
So I think that that's interesting when it comes to the hypnotherapy, that it kind of just opens up another idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and there's this really interesting idea. I studied Jungian psychology, and Jungian psychology is all about the symbol and the meaning of the symbol. So when we move from the space of the head into the body, we come up with certain symbols that are particularly meaningful for us and hold a lot of energy in the psyche, in the self. And so the more we lean into those spaces in ourselves, the more we kind of embody those symbols, and they create more meaning for us. So we can work directly with the symbol in hypnotherapy, and it means all of those pieces. So that the symbol begins to mean to you on an inner level, I will only work toward things that I value, and I won't do anything I don't value, and I'm a hard worker. Like if there was a symbol out there in the world, what symbol would evoke that piece of information for you? So that we're working on that, you know, on a deeper level, instead of talking just about what's in the head, like a cognitive behavioral approach.
And I think that that's what I realized too, was that it was more of the wanting to help people. That was, I think that's why I like serving a lot. I'm trying to figure that out still, but I was like, I like making people feel good. Like,
definitely.
So I was like, I'm gonna hone in on that skill, like, you know.
Sure. Do you have more questions for me about it?
I think with the hypnotherapy, once you do hone in on those skills, like, how do you continue them?
Well, so if you work with me to do a package, we figure out what's important to you and then what your value system is around it. And then we do this suggesting piece with the symbols, so that in between when you're working with me, those symbols are meaningful to you. And then we lean into your experience with those symbols and those experiences. And those become stronger and stronger. And some of those other tropes or beliefs or roles that we played start to fall away more easily. And so that's kind of how it works.
And how many sessions do you think that would take? Or
it depends. Well, it depends on a lot of things. That depends on how deeply held the unconscious belief is. Like, do you have limiting beliefs around it? Like, if I do, for instance, if I do hard work and I do what I love and I don't do something else, can I make a decent living? I have people who come to me say, I would love to do that, but I cannot make a decent living. And so they have this internalized limiting belief attached to that. So then you know that unconsciously that belief has gotten activated. So then we want to go deeper. When we want to go deeper, the belief is held in a more deep place. Now that depends on the individual too. I mean, I would think in working with you, it would lift pretty quickly because you're very, very...
I'm already there, kind of.
Yeah, you're very active. You're very aware of yourself. Someone who isn't, someone who has maybe more shame or more guilt or more reinforcement around beliefs that are not their own, like they endorse beliefs that aren't their own.
So then how would, I didn't mean to cut you off, but how would you get to somebody who is harder to get to belief-wise?
That's a really good question. So what you would do is you would move slower. You would move slower. You would be more gentle. You would be more interested in their inner life. you would do more of the counseling. So tell me about what that's about for you. Where in your life have you felt a real sense of meaning? Where have you felt like you were stirred on a deeper level?
So
and
it's
then you would get to the goal part slower because they're not ready yet.
So it's some sort of a psychological session, like a
Yeah, absolutely. Hypnotherapy is very
definitely.
psychological,
Okay.
but I also would say it's very soul-based, because whenever you're working with the symbol, you're working with the soul. You're working with a deeper sense of who you are than just the ego. And that's why with the collective unconscious, sometimes those symbols can hold meaning for a generation. They can hold meaning for a certain group of people. They can hold a wisdom that is in the unconscious, that, like, you know, that is flying in the face of maybe what they've been told something means.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they have been told and they are hell-bent on whatever they do believe,
Yeah.
is there any way that you can I guess adapt to that belief? I mean, what if they really are like, I was told I need to be a successful businessman and that is what I need to be, and
Right,
you
right.
know, like, and if that is what they want,
Right. That's different.
okay,
If that's in alignment with their beliefs, then we're in a really, really different place
Got it.
inside, right?
Mhm.
We're in a place where they're clear and they're very, very motivated,
Hell-bent on
and
what
they're
they want.
very activated, hell-bent, as you're saying.
Yeah.
And they're very, very activated to get to that space. So there's less clutter to kind of, what should I say? Massage. There's less stuff in the way. Imagine going into a room and you have a whole bunch of stuff that you don't use anymore, and you have to clean up the stuff. That takes time, right? But you can't just barge in and say, let's get rid of this. You have to say, well, this is something that has to do with something that's meant something in your life. What did it mean to you? And then they're ready to say, that doesn't serve me anymore, right?
You do have to filter all that out. I kind of did my own cleansing, I guess, in essence. There were a lot of things that I hadn't dealt with that were like creeping in to my
shadow.
daily life.
Yeah.
I always call it hemorrhaging. I was hemorrhaging,
good.
like where I
Great
was
that you have
like,
a word for
I was like, I'm hemorrhaging from all of this stuff, and I didn't really realize how much it was impacting my day. It had happened like 10 years ago, you know. So you think time takes over, but it doesn't, you know, like, and so I really sifted through every aspect, everything that I went through, dealt with it,
Good for
trying
you.
to understand it, you know, moved on or whatever, and then I went to the next step, and then I sifted through all of those things, and then I sifted through the next. But I do understand that I'm a little bit more open-minded, that I could do that kind of on my own, but not all on my own. You know, a lot of people helped me, but at the same time, I do believe that it's very important. It changed my life.
That's fantastic.
100% changed my life.
And that's a really good example. The fact that you're that self-motivated would be a huge asset in hypnotherapy.
And I think that that's true, but I also think that there are people who don't realize that it's affecting them.
No,
you know,
they don't.
They experienced something 10 years ago and they're like, well, it was 10 years ago.
Right.
You know, and you're like, but it's still here, you know, and I think maybe the hypnotherapy would help.
Yeah.
People,
I think that's true, but I also think it's super important to listen to the client. So I think that if some people aren't that affected, it's amazing. Some people just get over things just like that. And if they say it doesn't really affect me, then you look for signs. Is it still affecting
But I
you?
think that was my problem, is that I'm an extremely resilient, that is what all of my friends tell me. That's how they classify me. They're like, you're extremely resilient. And I think I was, though, thinking I was over it. I really thought, I truly thought I was over it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for you, like if we were to work together, that is something that we would assess over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Where are you at with that? Does that really feel like it's far away, or does that feel like it's kind of creeping in and affecting you? I'm just saying like that each client is an individual, and you have to be so curious and so what would I say?
Particular.
Yeah, particular is a really good word. Yeah.
About the person.
About the person, and have attentiveness to their story, to the subtle nuances of what their story is, what brings them there, so that like it's like turning over something, right? That's very, very unique, and seeing all the patterns that make it up. And you can't like just pull back from it and say, oh, it's just a marble. You have to say, wow, look at that line that goes into that crease, right? So you really have to be attentive throughout the whole process. And there are hypnotherapists who generalize about things. Oh, so this is about empowerment. So I'm going to use a bird because a bird means this, but it's not going to be specific to that client because it isn't their symbol.
And I think that that's probably what
like
makes
hemorrhage.
you different though,
Or,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like I would use the word hemorrhage if I were to work with you, because that's a word that means so much to you.
I was
your
like,
journey.
this is my journey. I was hemorrhaging from
And that's different
everything.
than, you know, that's different than having a couple drops of blood, right? That's different.
I think it is very like personification of,
Yes.
you know, trying to personify my feelings,
Yes.
or what I was feeling,
Exactly.
you
Yes.
know, or making it a little bit more physical, maybe in order for people to understand it better,
Yes.
or for me to understand it better.
Well, and then you're kind of talking about what's called elemental psychology, which I'll just talk about really, really briefly. But there are different types energetically: earth, air, fire, water. And you're not just one particular type. So when you think about hemorrhaging, there's something that's coming up from some deep place and pushing with depth through the core of something.
It was.
So then I think of earth and water, right? And
It
then
really
I'd be
was
curious
a
to
lot of
ask
pressure.
you, then I'd be curious to ask you something like, well, was the liquid that came up, what was it? What color was it? How much of it was there? Was it warm? Was it cold?
And
like
I would
all of those
say
things.
it was warm like lava, and it was black.
Right.
It
So
was like gunk.
right.
That's
It's
what
been
I
there
felt.
a long
Yeah.
time.
It was
right?
gunk that
Yeah.
I just like kept like digging up. Like I just kept digging it up, and I was like throwing it out on the floor. Like I got to deal with that, and that I haven't dealt with,
Right.
and that I
Good for
haven't
you.
dealt with. You know.
So like earth, air, that shows me earth, fire,
Interesting.
water, and air, right? You have the earth coming up from below, the water, it's liquid, the fire, it's warm, and it has to reach above the core of the earth. It has to be pulled
It did.
up
It had to be
air.
pulled up
It
to
had
the
to
air
come up to the air
in order to breathe.
So that's an alchemical experience
That's
you had there.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah,
I really did.
Yeah.
That's all very true.
yeah.
To me, like I couldn't breathe anymore. I just I felt like I couldn't
You
breathe.
couldn't breathe, no air.
And
No
I was
air.
like, I gotta do something. You
Well,
know,
good
like,
for you for doing that.
And I did. I worked a long time on it.
Good for you. Good for you. And I'm sure you're not done. I'm sure.
Oh
that,
no, definitely
that it'll
not.
at certain points in your life you'll have that experience again, but you might have it a little different. It might not be so deep. It might not be so warm. It might be.
I
and that will
also
tell
do
you.
agree with that too. Like, and I tell people all the time, and I tell my brother this all the time because he struggles with dealing with stuff. And I was like, the more you do deal with it, the easier it gets kind of over time. I was like, you get acclimated to it. And I was like, and you just know what to do at that point. I was like, but if you never, you know, it's just like cleaning. If you let dust build up, my God, there's amounts of dust that can build up. But if you clean it every 2 weeks or every 3, you know, you kind of tend to it just like you would a plant.
Tending to it, and that's a very.
You tend to your garden.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so I would then ask you, say you came for hypnotherapy and you did a lot of work and you moved through a lot of that stuff and you unearthed it and you let it see the light of day and you brought it out and you air dried it and all that work. And then you had something else that compounded, that brought it back to the surface again. But we could ascertain by working through it that it was a little bit different because it was a different quality of density, or it was a different heat or color. Right?
It's also recognizing the red flags for me too, where I'm like, ooh,
yeah,
I know what that did to me before,
exactly.
and I'm not gonna go near it again.
Right.
You know, like,
right, yeah.
And sometimes you do. I mean, everybody's human,
That's
but
right.
at
That's
the
right.
same time, I learned that too. I was like, ooh, I've been there, and I don't want to go back there again.
That's
you know?
right.
Like,
And so this would really be strengths with working with you. Would be your awareness of self, your motivation, your strength and your fortitude, your sense. You know, all of that would be stuff that we'd.
But
that would be strengths.
and I think that's why the hypnotherapy probably is so important.
Yeah.
I mean, I would consider myself a little bit more enlightened probably than most people. I think about it a lot. I think about the self-awareness, but I do observe so many people that I'm like, oh, if you could just see, you know, like you could change so much, you know, like, and I think that that's probably the most important part of the hypnotherapy is that it really is telling people that may have never thought of it, you know, and or they didn't know it was out there. You know, like how can you fix something that you don't even know exists, you know? So I think that kind of brings light to, if anything, just the things that you want to work on. And, you know,
absolutely, for sure.
Definitely agree with that.
Awesome, very cool. Well, thank you for chatting with me about hypnotherapy today.
In the garden, right?
Yeah, if you'd like to know more, you can go to my YouTube channel, innervoiceintuitive.com, and give me a call. Check out my website, check out my Facebook presence and Instagram presence, and I'd love to work with you. Have a great day. Bye now.